Hello, and thank you for joining me. So, I won't make this one very long, but I do want to touch on some of the issues that we know about. I've actually been travelling this past few days. I was in Belfast for my dear grandmother's funeral, and so I have caught segments of the news during and after travelling. So, what do we know? This attack in Manchester is the worst in the UK in 12 years, surpassing the earlier attack in Westminster and the deadliest attack in this country since the London bombings of 2005. We know that at least 22 people have died so far, and 59, 60 people are in hospital. I imagine there's many other people being treated for stress trauma and post-traumatic stress related conditions. Probably also when these sort of things happen, I always think of those who have died, but I also one of the groups of people I immediately think of is the emergency services and those who have to have the very difficult job of speaking to loved ones. I think it must be one of the hardest jobs around, and we really, really should consider the work that these people do. Tonight, apparently, the security threat level has been raised to critical. That's very rare, even amidst terrorist incidents. I think in order to have critical, that means that an attack is expected imminently. That suggests to me that MI5 may have been tipped off tonight of another attack, or we are going to expect something else. I think that what we are going to see is a spate of a phase of terrorism the way France did. Um, After the Westminster attack, that kind of brought home that this this pan-Islamist terror spread all over Europe. It's plagued the Middle East for years, and it's now starting to spread in Britain. It's in terms of the targets. This was obviously a music venue. Ariana Grande was in concert. Hundreds of young people. I think that's what makes this attack particularly vicious, and I think it's really going to have a profound impact on the way society looks at it, because it was particularly, every terrorist attack is brutal, but when it's targeted at defenseless teenagers and in some cases children, it's really is sickening. I think the Prime Minister's statement was powerful, and I think she was absolutely right in her description of this. I also think President Trump's description in calling them losers, um, it's unconventional, but I think I knew where Trump was coming from. Terrorists want to feel like warriors. They want to feel like fighters, like soldiers of whatever twisted cause they have. Um, so calling them losers takes away their ego, and I think it has its effect. What I've been thinking about today, obviously the people of Manchester and the city of Manchester, it's been a bit of a baptism of fire for Andy Burnham, the new mayor, but the response has been, in a sense now, protocol with a major terrorist attack. We've seen this with every attack that's hit Western liberal democracies in Paris, in Berlin, in Brussels, in Nice. Um, every time we see these major attacks, it's the usual. I don't want to say rhetoric, but statements of unity and coming together and this sort of thing. Now, I don't want to be cynical about that, because I think there's very good intentions behind it, and I think that there's nothing wrong with candlelit vigils, with waving flags in solidarity, this sort of thing. I've done it myself. Um, I don't think there's anything wrong with that in principle. However, I think we really need to get smart about this, and we have to, I think, accept the fact that terrorists are not going to suddenly find the light by seeing people coming together and, lighting candles and all, honouring the victims. Cross faith work is great, but again, it will not get jihadists to see the light. And I think, once again, this comes down to honesty. There's been a lot of talk today, let's not let them divide us, etc., etc. Well, the way I see this is, certainly the approach that focuses on all Muslims. that certain blood and soil nationalists might want to take would only be aiding ISIS. With these lone wolf attacks, firstly, they're not entirely lone wolf because even if the act is carried out by an individual, he will have had to get the equipment from someone, the bomb-making material, etc. And apparently there has been another arrest made in Manchester. What do we know about this guy? He was 23. He grew up in Manchester but was of Libyan descent. He studied at the University of Salford. And as far as I know, he had no crime record. And this is the thing with terrorists. It's not necessarily a case that there's a simple profile that you can put every terrorist into. Every Islamist terrorist even, there is not a simple profile. It does vary somewhat from case to case, but I think there are things that certainly detecting radicalism early on is very important. Now, one thing I would implore people to consider is don't be too hard on the security services. People always say, they look at things and say, well, this guy was known to the police, why wasn't he arrested, and so on. I think we have to consider the amount of attacks that are thwarted by the security services. Clearly, when these attacks get through, when they're successful, and I hate to use that word in this context, but when they succeed, there's a huge amount of attention on that. There's far, far less attention on the attacks that are thwarted every single day by unknown men and women who work around the clock to keep us safe. And I do feel that there is simply no way to absolutely stop terrorism. I mean, authoritarian states have faced terrorist attacks, so there is nowhere in the world, no matter how rigid the security system is, that can stop this. What does ISIS want? They want to spread their global caliphate. I do want to talk about this issue of ideology. It is extremely important. I understand, and I was listening to the local Northern Ireland radio as we were driving through Belfast, and it was the usual things that's come together. That's not blame the Muslim community and so on. I get this, right? But most people are not blaming all Muslims. That is not the general reaction to these attacks. It's not. But the idea that there is no religious ideology behind this is plain wrong. It's plain dishonest. And I am very frustrated with the dishonesty that is out there. I think it's probably coming from a point that you don't want a situation where ISIS is succeeding by saying, look, we're creating this war between Muslims and the West. And therefore, getting Muslims to feel frightened that they will be victims of vigilantes and getting non-Muslims to feel that they will be targeted by crazy Islamists. They do want that division, but by the same token, I don't think it is right to be dishonest about this and insist that there is no religious connection, because imams from the Muslim Council of Britain or other faith groups can, come out with this nice language and say they condemn terrorism. That's wonderful. But the fact of the matter is, Islamists interpret the Quran to justify what they're doing. So when people say, oh, but you're misreading it or you're misunderstanding it, clearly the Islamists believe that they are true Muslims. They believe that it is moderate Muslims, or i.e. those Muslims who don't want to kill apostates, who are the apostates. What is going on within Islam is a deep sectarianism that is absolutely obvious. And I really, really think that when these things happen, you don't want to say Islam is a dangerous religion, let's ban Islam, because that isn't going to be practically possible anyway. But I do think it is wrong to simply call this terrorism and criminality. It is barbaric, it's heinous, all those adjectives, yes. But there is an ideology there. There is an ideology there. So saying, as far as I'm concerned, saying that Islamist terrorism has nothing to do with Islam is a bit like saying the IRA campaigns were nothing to do with Irish nationalism, or the ETA campaigns were nothing to do with Catalan independence. Look at the ideology. Because no amount of denying this is going to change the fact. It's the worst sort of virtue signaling, not recognizing what the problem is. We can condemn it, we can talk about society coming together, all the rest of it. But I think we have to at least be honest about the problem. And any of my Muslim viewers who may be watching this, what I would respectfully say to you is you have a problem within your religion. This extreme interpretation of Islam. You can say that they're wrong, you can say they're misguided, you can say they're not true Muslims, but you know what? They say you're not true Muslims. This is a problem within Islam. You can say Islam is perfect, and this sort of terrorism is a modern phenomenon, but in the end of the day, they're not acting in the name of Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism or Judaism. Pan-Islamists want to spread an Islamic caliphate, and it is from an ideology of Islamic supremacy. When you listen to the rhetoric, when you listen to how they view non-Muslims, this is Islamic supremacy we are dealing with. So I'll leave it there. Manchester's been through terrorism before. There were IRA attacks in the 1990s, but this is a really major attack, and it won't be the last in this country. I think we have to get clever about this. In terms of the tributes and so on, I don't agree with those who say that when attacks happen, don't show any coverage because that's what terrorists want. I really don't think that terrorists have this idea about being celebrities. I don't think that's what motivates them. I think fanaticism motivates them. I really don't think the average Islamist kind of thinks, oh, I want to be famous with this. Maybe some do, but I don't think that is a guiding principle. So by saying we'll only give them the attention, I don't think that's what motivates them. So people say, for example, terrorists want to divide us. Well, most people are not blaming all Muslims. I'm not. And that is not what's happening. So the narrative is being misdirected. We should not be focusing on politeness and etiquette and being too sensitive, quite frankly. We need to focus on honesty. We need to focus on honesty here. And it does make me angry sometimes that we are not doing that, because by not doing it, we're not really addressing the problem. And again, I'm not suggesting that the answer is to get up and say Islam's a violent religion, why are all the terrorists Muslims? Most terrorist attacks are large-scale attacks, but the question is not, are all Muslims terrorists? The question is, why is this Pan-Islamism a profoundly different thing from what we see from extremism in other religions? You simply don't have this in the same way from extreme Christians or Jews or Hindus or Buddhists or Sikhs. Yes, you get extremists in those religions, of course you do. But this pan-Islamist narrative is different. It's politicized in a different way. And no amount of what I would say to the Muslim Council of Britain is, I respect the fact that you are trying to reach out, but you're also trying to basically whitewash your religion and say there is no problem going on here. Telling the wider community, oh, don't blame Islam, is frankly wearing thin. That, you need to address the fact this is something that is happening within Islam. And until you recognize that, then frankly the tributes, I won't say they mean nothing, but I'm not sure if it is the priority. I'm not sure if it is the priority. You don't put out a fire and say, let's cry about the damage. You look at the sources that is causing this. I think identifying radicalization from an early age is certainly important. I strongly believe in isolating Islamists in prison, because you don't want someone going in for shoplifting, being subjected to someone who's a hate preacher. Definitely we need to take a much, much, much tougher line with hate preachers. We shouldn't tolerate them. We shouldn't sort of quietly say, oh, you can do this in the street or whatever. As soon as they start preaching about, looking down on Jews or women or infidels or whatever, as soon as they start preaching this fascist mentality in the street, they should be arrested. And they should be, I would actually be up for the idea of a specific prison being constructed just for Islamists. That way they can't poison other minds. There's a lot of questions we're going to have. There's a lot of things we need to look at. So, my heart goes out to all the victims, but we have to be clever about this. We really do. Thanks for watching.